call, I'll certainly walk through how the votes will go, because on one of them, the voting is a little bit more, it's not complicated, but it's a more unusual pattern than we typically have. So with that, Councilor Downs, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. We are joined online tonight by Councilors Greenberg, Humphrey, and Gentile. We do have a couple of absences now. I hope several of those people will be joining us later. This meeting is being both audio and videotaped. And with that, I'm going to ask for a motion from Councilor Malachy for a suspension of the rules to go into a committee of the whole with finance presiding, so we can hear the assessor's report. Finance committee. Luckily, I have the clerk here to correct all my errors, which can be numerous, as I'm free to admit. But Clerk Moore is quite knowledgeable of our rules, so go ahead, Councilor Malachy, please.
Okay, I'd like to request a suspension of the rules for the Finance Committee to have a public hearing on item 455-24 for the tax classification.
Okay, so Councilor Malachy's asked for suspension of the rules so we can go into a Finance Committee meeting with Finance Vice Chair Malachy presiding. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The full council's in recess while we go through this. Councilor Malachy, podium's yours.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, are we on here? Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone, in particular Assessor Jim Shaughnessy. Will begin with a presentation. There will be a public hearing. First, we will have questions from councilors. We'll hear from the public if anyone wants to comment or ask questions, and then we'll return for more councilor questions. So I think, Jim, you ready? And I believe this is the first time in person since 2019, so it's great to have you back.
Hi, is that better? All right. So I've got a little presentation, take a couple minutes. First thing I'd like to say, though, is I'm thrilled to be back. And I'm not standing here without the help of everybody on the staff, and I want to thank them all for the tremendous work they do during the year. Kind of makes it enjoyable to come to work every day because of what they do. So. All right, so I'll try and. So here we are, and you're probably asking yourself, some of the new councilors, what am I doing here? That's a good question. But there's our staff that I'd like to say thank you. They work hard all the time. We're here all the time. We don't do any remote work. Anybody ever has a call, they come in, they can deal with anybody anytime they want. And I'd like to say thank you to Steve in the print shop for the books that you have in front of you. He was gracious enough to print them and assemble them. So I'm only as good as the people that are helping us out. So now the question is, why are we here? You guys are going to decide which portion of the tax levy you want the commercial people to bear and what portion you want the residential people to bear. And that's what that's ultimately what you're voting on tonight. You set a budget back in April. You've already decided how much money you want to spend. Now you just got to decide who's going to pay what portion. So, quick overview of what's going on in the city of Newton property values. As you know, Newton's mostly residential. Single families and condos make up almost 80% of the total value, so we are as residential as you can get. All residential values make up 91.92%, which obviously means if residential are 91.92, the commercial is 8.08. So commercial, industrial, and personal make up 8.08% of the values. Here's what the single-family sale prices have done from 2015 to 2024. And as you can see, every year is higher than the prior year. So the single-family values have been selling, like I say, the median. So more than half the houses in 2024 have sold for more than $1,724,000. And there's the pictorial representation of the same chart we just saw. So here are some interesting numbers that at least I think they're interesting. Hopefully you will. So 96% sell for more than $750,000. 84% sell for more than $1 million. Staggeringly, 60.48% sell for more than $1.5 million. And my favorite, 39% sell for more than $2 million for single families. So if you own a single family in Newton, there's a 40% chance it's going to sell for $2 million or more. I think that's great news if you're a Newton property owner. Here's a few sales. This is what $430,000 sold for in November of 2023. 1,200 square feet of land, 780 square feet of house. And then it resold 2 months later for $443,000. So it sold for 3% higher 2 months later. Here's what $750,000 bought in 2023. Same in New Anthem. 5,900 square feet of land, 1,300 square feet of house. Sold 11 months later for $894,000 with no renovations. It's pretty good. Lower Falls had a sale for $1 million. Again, 5,600 square feet of land, 1,800 square feet of house. That's what $1 million bought as a sample. $1.5 million. Oak Hill Park, 11,000. So now the lot's gotten a little bigger. 2,400 square foot house, 9 rooms, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. Then they tore it down in August of 2024. $2 million. Newton Center, north of Beacon Street, 10,000, almost 11,000 square feet of land, 2,800 square feet of house. After they paid $2 million for it, they put another $350,000 plus into it for renovations. So $2 million house needed some work. Here's a $3 million sale in Oak Hill Park. Again, 8,500 square feet of land, 3,500 square feet of house. That's what $3 million gets you in Oak Hill Park. Back in 1993, when those were selling for $140,000, the ranches, I was here for those. If I told you they were going to sell for $3 million, you probably would have had me wheeled out of here. $6 million. Newton Center, south of Beacon Street. For Newton, that's a big lot, 30,000 square feet, 5,600 square feet of house. So there's what $6 million bought in 2023. Here's an example of some mixed-use development. And as I put in a note over there, this property sold recently. When I say recently, 6 days ago, for $114 million. So some of you might have known that, some of you might not have, but that's another $100+ million sale in Newton. And it happened 6 days ago. Here's some commercial development. They redid the street over on Route 9. So things are still doing well out there. So now let's get back to what are we here for? And you're going to decide you're going to actually be voting on a residential factor, which will then determine what's split between the residential and commercial. You voted to shift 175 in 3 of the last 5 fiscal years, and probably the year you didn't do 175, you're probably 174. But that's, Newton's pretty much been at 175 for the majority of years. So if you select 175, what are you doing? Well, if the commercial represents 6% of the value, multiplying that by 1.75, they would pay 10.64% of the tax, and so on. So if the commercial, industrial, and personal property pay more, then ultimately the residents that make up 91.92% of the value would pay 85.86% of the tax. That's what you're here to decide tonight. And all of this is on page 22 or 23, so If you wanted a quick cheat sheet, if you open to page 22 and 23, everything you need to know is going to be on those 2 pages. So you don't have to flip through any pages. Everything you need will be on those 2. So ultimately, if, for example, if you voted to 175 shift tonight, you'd be voting for the residential factor of 0.934219. And the corresponding tax rates would be 980 and 1834. And I'm brief, but I'll take any questions you have. And Maureen's going to give a little talk first.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks to all of you. It's nice to be standing here with you all this evening. As Jim said, to go over again what it is that you're all here for, particularly for the new counselors who will be taking this vote this evening, it's to determine how we classify the tax. It's called the tax classification hearing. It's how we determine how much of the tax burden our commercial properties will bear. For your purposes this evening, although Jim's book is full of fabulous information, and I hope that you really do have the opportunity to go through and look at it, there are a tremendous amount of numbers in this book. The most important page of this book for all of you this evening is page 22. And so on page 22, the assessor's office has delineated exactly what the impact would be of the decision that you are going to make. For most of the time in my almost 15 years that I have been here, the city has passed along a factor, if you will, to the commercial properties of approximately 1.75. That is the maximum that we can move over to the commercial properties, 1.75% more than what their share of the value would have been for the taxes. There's a couple of things that we look at in particular. The first item is about 2/3 of the way down the page. You can see where it's listed as shift selected, so rounded would be 175. Next line is shift selected actual, because we always put our tax bills and our tax rate in actual pennies. We always need to adjust that shift selected amount by just the tiniest bit to make sure that we have pennies. The residential factor, that's the actual number that will be part of your motion this evening, that line, as for what it is that you're moving over to the commercial property. And then the last of those 4 lines is the excess levy capacity. One of the things that we do is, one of the first things we do is we take a look to see how can we leave the least amount of money on the table, if you will? How can we have our tax bills go out for as much of the tax levy that we have all voted on to spend in the budget? And so if you look at the anywhere from 170 to 175% as the residential factors, you can see that at 175, we leave the least amount of money on the table, at only $16,000 that we do not end up ultimately billing for money that we could bill within our levy limit. So that has a start to look there at 175 column, because that's a key number for us. The next thing that we look at then is, if we go up to the section that's just above that, to understand what the tax increases are by class. And so what the median is for single families, 2 families, commercial, and industrial classes. You can see that the 175 enables the single family class to bear the lowest increase in their tax bills if we choose 175. 2 families, again, it would be the lowest impact to the 2 families. And what's always key, though, is this is a zero-sum game. And so if we're lowering, or if we're picking the lowest amount for the single family and 2 family homes, what is it doing to the commercial increase to their property? You can see that the commercial taxes, because of the shift in values, commercial property owners, if we go with the 1.75%, commercial property owners would only see a 1.22% increase in their tax rate. And the industrial, it would only be a 0.15% increase in their rate. We live under Proposition 2.5. Our levy limit increases by 2.5% if we choose to do that. As Jim said, we've already made that decision. That decision was made back in April when when the mayor presented a budget to you and when you all supported it. We all knew that we would be raising our levy limit by the full 2.5%. So that's not what you're here to decide. You're only here to decide how much do we ask the commercial property owners to pay in the city. As I said, we've been in the 175 range for basically the full amount of time that I have been here. This year, it is our recommendation from the mayor's office that we go with the 175. It technically is 174.85, and the number, though, that you would be voting on is actually the residential factor line. And so if you go with the 175, it's the 0.934219 is the number that you will actually be voting as your residential factor. And so, as Jim said, either one of us are more than happy to answer any questions. And then, Madam Vice Chair, I'm sure you'll be opening the public hearing, and we will be more than happy to come back up after there's any dialogue during the public hearing, and again, answer any questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lemieux. So I'd like to note that we've been joined in the chamber by Councilors Wright and Krinsman. And are there any questions? Councilor Lobovitz, and then Getz.
I'm just curious about how we compare to surrounding communities which we might be competing with on the commercial side, what their rates are.
If you look at the supplement in the back of that book, it'll have every community from last year. All 350, I think 351 community didn't get certified. But I think that, like, Boston wants to shift more than 175. Waltham has a split rate, Watertown has a split rate, Cambridge has a split rate. I don't know if that's, but the tax rates themselves are all in the back of that book for every community in the state.
Could you just summarize the more immediate surrounding communities? Do you know that offhand? Sort of a range, or you don't know that?
I mean,
Okay.
if you're asking me what Watertown and Cambridge, I mean, I can read it and find out, but. So,
If I can jump in for a second. I think what's more important, so if you turn to the section that has page 1 of 11, so it's probably 2/3 of the way through the book. If you find so it's not really page 11, it's page 1 of 11. Go about 2/3 of the way through.
Oh, 1 of 11, okay.
Okay? If everyone has found that. The tax rate is perhaps not as important as the average tax bill. And so this is where, as Jim said, we list the average tax bill for every community across the state. And so you can see that Newton is 15th. So our average single-family tax bill is $15,642. And the highest is Weston, then Brookline, Lincoln, Concord, Sherburne. It's not really surprising who the top 15 are, with us rounding out being in number 15. So does that help, Councilor Lobovitz?
But how does that translate into the commercial rate, you know, the 175, the 175%?
the 175 has nothing to do with, that's what you're deciding what to shift.
I understand.
So like Boston actually want to go higher.
So, sorry, Mr. Shaughnessy, yeah, if you could speak closer to the
All
microphone.
right, so the shifts of 175 are similar. Boston wants to actually pass an ordinance to go higher than 175 through special legislation. And if you go to page 20, you can see the breakdown of residential and commercial taxes raised. But you're going to see most of these communities that do the shift are going to be up in the 175 range. That's the best I can say.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Getz.
I just, I see this as two pools, competing pools, the residential and the commercial, in terms of the full, they're sharing and they're sort of allocating between the two pools the rates that they're going to assume. So has there been any, I would love to know, just in terms of the number of participants, the number of residential properties versus the number, the delta, the flux. Have the number of commercial properties shifted down so that then they will have to assume a higher rate? And then the residential, I assume, increases, so there are more properties that are going to be sharing the burden, the tax burden.
Well, if you're looking at the strict number of parcels, I don't know if I would look at it that way. I'd look at more of how the valuation shifts occur. And there's a page in there for real estate valuation changes early in the book. So for example, if you look at page 6, it'll tell you how the residential values, the commercial values. So the residential values, single families have gone up like 3.81%, and the commercial values have gone down a little bit overall. So that just by the natural valuation change, the residential people would share more of the tax increase that you voted for back in the budget, because the values of the residential properties have increased faster than the commercial properties.
Okay.
In some years, the commercial properties were increasing faster than the residential. This year, the residential seemed to appreciate more than the commercial.
Okay, and then in terms of trying to be business friendly, in terms of the trend here, what is the recommendation? In terms of, this assessment through these, these 5 options, or these 6 options. Is there any recommendation?
Maureen just made, I would not make a recommendation. My job is to present you with information
Okay.
and let you guys make a decision.
Okay,
Maureen gave a recommendation, and you can probably put a lot of weight in that.
okay. Okay, got it.
I'm sorry, Counselor, could you repeat?
No, I just personally want to know, in terms of the 6 choices, I'm hearing that you're recommending the 175.
So our recommendation is the 175 for 2 reasons. Because it leaves the least amount of money on the table. So the excess levy capacity, that's the first number that we look at when we come before you to make a recommendation. And then the second number is what does it do by us moving the 175? What does it do to the commercial increase versus the residential increases? And so it helps our residents the most, and it still has only a 1.2% increase in taxes for the commercial enterprises in the city. If we were to come forward and let's say that the 170 had the least amount of money left on the table. Let's say that with 170 it was only 10,000 that we wouldn't have collected. We would have then looked to understand what happens with the tax rates itself, and we probably would have recommended still the 175 if it was a close amount, because we certainly do not want to pass along a 4.7% tax increase to all the residents if we can avoid it while making sure that we're not doing something that's harmful to the commercial base in the city. And so we first, as I say, first look at that excess levy capacity number, but then we really take a hard look at what's happening within the 4 different classes that we show you here of properties, so that we really understand what the tax increase is by class of property. And so as Jim said, residential values are increasing faster than commercial values, and because of that, there's an inherent shift in the market. And so the residents are already bearing more than a 2.5% increase.
Okay, we have Councilors Block and Albright next, and we've been joined by Councilors Baker and Leary, and I just wanted to remind everyone to speak into their microphone, even though you might be turning your head around. Thank you. So Councilor Block.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious about the excess levy capacity on page 22 and why it's so different, I guess. Does it have to do with the number of decimal places we're allowed to use in the residential factor, which is 6, or is there something else going on? Thank you.
It has to do with tax rates are only 2 pennies, for example, $9.80. It can't be $9.80.275. It's either 80 cents or 81 cents. And so that's why when using the various rates, you're never going to, I mean, I guess mathematically it's possible that a certain shift could get you to the levy limit exactly, but it's unlikely because you can't round pennies. Pennies as low as you round.
And that's state law that limits that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't bill, like, you can't bill $20 per thousand or $20.01. Those are your choice, you know, you can't be $20 and half a cent.
So the penny lives on?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilor Albright.
So one quick question. The one on Los Angeles Street that you showed us, you said it was mixed use. There's commercial in the first floor of that building?
First floor commercial, the rest of it is living space.
Huh, I didn't realize that. Okay. But my other question is, recently I was with a group of people not from Newton, and I learned that there's tremendous tax benefits in Watertown and Boston. If you're a resident, you get tremendous tax breaks. And now looking at this chart on page 20, I can see that a lot has to do with the percentage of commercial versus residential in your city. So we have 85% commercial, 85% residential. And in Watertown, it's 50% residential. So that means 50% is on the commercial side, which is a huge benefit for the people who live in that city. And Boston has the same thing. So this is just something for us to think about in the future. If we want to bring in more taxes and lighten the load for those of us living in single and two-family homes and condominiums and so forth, the best way to do that is to share the load and have more commercial things going on in our city. So whatever we can do to make that happen would lighten the load, the tax load, I think.
Well, I think one of the things Councilor Albright's talking about too is they call it the residential exemption. Boston has it, Waltham has it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a misnomer because it doesn't really exempt anything. It shifts it from one group to another.
Yeah.
So you could be a single-family owner in Waltham. You could be receiving the residential exemption, and you will be paying more than if you didn't receive the exemption.
But that wasn't the case in the two cities that I was hearing about, which was Watertown and Boston.
It is the case. They just don't publicize that because if those communities were slated to raise $100 million in residential taxes and they adopt the residential exemption, they're still going to collect $100 million from the same residents. So it's not an exemption. If you pay less, you'll pay more. If you pay more, you'll pay less. Excuse me. It just
Yes,
moves
but
it around.
if more of your properties are, if the balance is 50-50 versus 85-15,
Yep.
then the burden of taxes can be shared more equally between the commercial and the residential. Isn't that the case?
Mathematically, if you had a high percentage of commercial value, you're still deciding the residents are going to pay X. Once you decide what they're paying X and you adopt the residential exemption, they're still going to pay X. So somebody's going to pay more in the residential class, somebody's going to pay less. But the net overall taxes in the residential class is the same no matter what you do. And in an owner-occupied community like Newton, it wouldn't make sense. They originally wrote that law for communities like at Cape Cod where it's a second home. So because it's supposed to be for non-owner occupied, they'll pay more in taxes, but owner-occupied properties with a higher value would also pay more in taxes. Maybe the people you were talking to had lower valued homes in Waltham or Watertown, but it would certainly not shift anything.
If I could jump in for a second, because I may be incorrect, but I think what Councilor Albright was saying or asking is if we have say we have a vacant piece of property and someone builds a house on it for $2 million, or someone builds a commercial building for $2 million. The property owner has spent the same amount of money. The property is assessed at the same amount of money. The commercial property would end up paying 175% of the taxes that the residential property is paying. And so that's where I think Councilor Albright was saying the help comes to the residents because it moves a little bit of money from the residents to the commercial. So
Thank you for interpreting my question.
okay.
Thank you.
And Councilor Lucas said, I think if there are no further questions in the chamber, and you will get another chance, I think after Councilor Lucas, we'll go and see if there's any public comment or questions.
Thank you, Chair. I have no questions, but thank you for the presentation and the wonderful summary you do every year, and always you're available to answer questions whenever I send them to you, and you're very, very sharp on this topic. But I think I am going to vote the same way how I vote every year, and unfortunately that is the opposite of what you recommend, Ms. Lemieux. I like the 170. It gives the commercial property owners the most favorable tax increase, and the excess levy capacity is only 32,000. So I'm with 170.
All right, can I see if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak? Okay, yes, so I need a motion to open the public hearing. Thank you. All in favor? Okay. Okay, anyone in the public, in the participants list, if you'd like to raise your hand, and you'll be unmuted. Last chance. Okay, do I have a motion to close the public hearing? Thank you. All in favor? Okay. Okay, so the public hearing is closed. Are there any further comments or questions from either Finance Committee members or other members? Councilor Block.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councilor Lucas, I have to disagree with you. I don't want to disappoint all the different classes here in their, I'm sure, desire to contribute to our financial stability. So I think having a really small increase for everyone's a good idea. So I'll be voting 175%. Thank you.
I'll make that motion if you need one.
Okay.
I'll make the motion for 175.
All right. Okay, this is only the Finance Committee will be voting on this. Are there any further comments on the motion? Councilor Krinsman.
Just to clarify, I think the motion is for a residential factor of 0.934219. The motion is actually for a residential factor of 0.934219, which represents the 175% shift. But I think technically we vote on the factor.
Okay, if there are no further comments, all those in favor of the motion to use a residential factor of 0.934219, raise your hands. Finance Committee only, Finance Committee only. So I see 4 in the room and 2 online. So that is 6.
My hand is up, Council Gentile.
Showing up yet. So that's 7 in favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so I think we are done, and the motion passes 7-0. Thank you all. Need to do anything else? Just adjourn the Finance Committee and then Mark. Okay, Finance Committee is now adjourned, and welcome back, Mark.
Madam Clerk, may I go back into full session now? All right. So we are back in full session of the Newton City Council. Thank you, Vice Chair Maliki, for leading that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy and your team for all of your efforts. You know, day in and day out, you do a terrific job. I think I speak on behalf of all of us that I know when we call you with a comment or a question, however perhaps silly or not clear, you do an amazing job of returning our calls promptly. You give us detailed information. I think all of us feel we trust in a great deal the work that you and your team do. So on behalf of all of us, want to thank you for that. All right, so we are going to go to first call, colleagues. We're going to start off with the Land Use Committee. Chair Kelly, we're going to go through first call, and then, as I said earlier, we have 2 items in second call. Go ahead, please, Chair Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Land Use Committee, excuse me, met on November 12th. Aside from some held items, we voted on petition number 420-24, which was a request to exceed FAR at 16 Chask Ave. That was approved 8-0. We approved a request for extension of time, which was number 424-24, also approved 8-0. We approved quite a few Class 2 auto dealer licenses. I'm just going to read the docket number and the name of the establishment for time's sake. Number 425-24, which is Regan's Inc. Number 426-24, which is Newton Auto Group Inc. Number 427-24, Newton Center Shell Inc. Number 428-24, Jacob and Associates. Number 429-24, Velocity Motors. Number 430-24, Stan's Automotive, Inc. Number 431-24, MAP Development and Investments, DBA Christian Tapia Master Used Cars. Number 432-24, Newton Trade Center Associates, Inc. Number 433-24, Grand Auto Sales, DBA KG Motors, LLV. And finally, number 434-24, Grand Auto Sales. That is it. Thank you.
Great. And there are no public hearings to assign this evening, correct?
There are no public hearings to assign.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Kelly. Chair Baker, on behalf of the Zoning and Planning Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee report begins on 265. The first item on the report is number 31124. This is a request, discussion, and possible amendments to dormer regulations in Chapter 30 zoning, and that was approved 7-0. The next item is 385-24 on page 266. This was a requesting an amendment relating to a minor technical change to the opt-in requirements for village center overlay districts, and that was approved 7-0. Item 383-24, again on page 266, was the appointment of Charles Eisenberg as an associate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. That was approved 5-0-2. Councilors Oliver and Wright abstaining. Councilor Kritzman not voting. And then 391-24, appointment of Deborah Crosley as an associate member of the
That
zoning.
item is on second call.
It is?
Chair Baker.
Oh, okay, I thought it was not. I'm sorry. Oh, it is? Okay, then I'll report that on second call. Thank you. Then I just move the report of the items that we have.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Chair, I'm sorry, Councilor Kelly.
Thank you. I'm sorry. My colleague pointed out to me that I forgot one item. So if we can go back to land use for one moment.
And I must have missed it as well, so go
Thank
ahead,
Councilor
please.
Downs. I see why I missed it, but that's not important. Also, at the meeting we had last week, number 329-24, which was a request for 2 parking stalls at 15-17 Playstead Road, was also approved 8-0.
329-24 was approved, it looks like 7-1. So that was approved 7-1. Do I have that correct?
The 8-0 was the public hearing closing.
Right. Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. Thank you, Chair Kelly. Next, Chair Krinsman for Programs and Services, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You sure you're done? Okay. Councilor Baker, you're all set, right? Okay.
You can proceed, Councilor Krinsman. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Programs and Services Committee met on November 6th. The report begins on page 267. Item 297-24, requesting a discussion on the current status of transitioning to electric school buses, was voted no action necessary by a vote of 6-0. The next item was held, and I believe 409-24 is on second call. Is that right? Okay. So item 412-24, this was authorization to appropriate and expend $338,119 for McKinney-Vento homeless student transportation, was approved by a vote of 6-0. And item 435-24, Hancock Estates easement for walking trail access, was approved by a vote of 5-0. With that, I would move the report.
Thank you. Chair Grossman for the Public Safety and Transportation Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report begins on page 268. The committee met on November 6th. The first item, 408-24, was the authorization to appropriate and expend $1 million to purchase PFAS-free firefighter gear. That was approved 5-0 with 1 recused. Item 414-24, authorization to appropriate and expend $75,000 for Fire Shift Commander's vehicle replacement, was approved 5-0 with 1 recused. Item 415-24, authorization to appropriate and expend $1.8 million for Fire Ladder Truck 3 replacement, was approved 5-0 with 1 recused. And with that, I move the report.
Thank you very much, Chair Grossman. Next, for Public Facilities, I have Chair Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our report begins on page 269, but several of the items we did not actually hold that night because work on that night because National Grid wasn't able to come. So those items will be taken up on December 4th. The items that we did take up were 405-24, authorization. Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend $1 million from free cash to support the vehicle replacement program, and that was approved 6 in favor, none against. 406-24 was Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend $200,000 from free cash on the FY25 traffic calming projects in line with the resolution from the City Council during the budget process, and that was approved 6 in favor and none against. And that concludes the report.
Thank you, Chair Albright. Next, I have for the Finance Committee, Vice Chair Maliki, please.
Thank you, President. Okay, the report begins on page 273. The committee met on November 13. The first item was number 403-24, CPC recommendation to appropriate $1,841,719.78 in CPA funding from the housing budgeted reserves and unrestricted fund balance to the Newton Affordable Housing Trust for their FY25 funding, approved 6-0. Number 405-24, to appropriate and expend $1 million for the vehicle replacement program from certified free cash. Finance approved 6-0. Number 406-24, authorization to appropriate and expend $200,000 for FY25 traffic calming projects. Finance approved 6-0. Number 407-24, to appropriate and expend $50,000 for the purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department. That's 30 units. The finance approved 6-0. Number 408-24, to appropriate and expend $1 million for PFAS-free firefighter gear, one set for each firefighter. Finance approved 6-0. Number 409-24 is on second call. Number 412-24, to appropriate and expend $338,119 for McKinney-Vento homeless student transportation. That's basically a housekeeping item. It goes through free cash, but it's the federal funds. Finance approved 6-0. Another housekeeping item. Number 413-24, to appropriate and expend $43,189.52. The proceeds from the HelpSee textile collection and recycling bins to the Newton School Department and Newton Public Schools. Finance approved 6-0. Number 414-24, to appropriate and expend $75,000 for a fire shift commander's vehicle replacement. Finance approved 6-0. Number 415-24, to appropriate and expend $1,800,000 for the replacement of fire ladder truck 3. Finance approved 6-0. And I need to request a suspension of the rules to provide a report for a meeting for which there is no written report.
So Vice Chair Malik has requested a suspension of rules to report out an item for which there's no written report. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Go ahead, please, Vice Chair Maliki.
Okay, the Finance Committee met mere minutes ago and heard from Assessor Shaughnessy on the tax classification hearing, and also from CFO Lemire. We voted 7-0 to set the residential factor at 0.934219 for FY25. And the vote was 7-0.
Thank you, Vice Chair Maliki. Chair Danberg for Real Property Reuse.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report tonight.
Thank you, colleagues. So I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll on first call. We then are going to turn to our 2 second call items. Go ahead, please, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Albright.
Aye.
Councillor Baker.
Aye.
Councillor Bixby.
Aye.
Councillor Block.
I vote no on 383-24 and am recused from 407-24, 408-24, 414-24, and 415-24.
Councillor Danberg.
Aye.
Councillor Downs.
Aye.
Councillor Farrell.
Aye, except for item 329-24, I vote no. Thank you.
That is a land use item, correct, Chair, Councilor Farrell? Is this a land use item? Would you, I know we're on first call, but would you just, in 5 or 10 words, I know you stated your opposition in committee, but we do need to have some record. If you could just do that briefly.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. President. Simply, I have a concern about the parking spaces. I don't think that they will accommodate the number of cars that were approved.
Fine. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Gentile.
Aye.
Councillor Getz.
Aye.
Councillor Greenberg.
Aye.
Councillor Grossman.
Aye.
Councillor Humphrey.
Aye.
Councillor Kalis. Councillor Kelly.
Aye.
Councillor Krinsman.
Aye.
Councillor Leary.
Aye.
Councillor Lipoff.
Aye.
Councillor Labovitz.
Aye.
Councillor Lucas.
Aye, with the exception of 455-24, for which I vote no.
Councillor Maliki.
Aye, with the exception of 383-24 and 329-24, for which I vote no. 329-24 is the land use item, and I also share concerns about reduced parking. Thank you.
Councillor Mickley. Councillor Oliver.
Aye.
Councillor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Give me one moment to go through all these.
I'm going to give you a moment, Madam Clerk. We have difficult calculations tonight. I'll make sure we get it right. Yes, sir.
Motion carries with the exception of item 383-24. Wait, motion carries, hold on, let's start over. Motion carries with 22 yeas, 0 nays, and 2 absent, with the exception of item 383-24 with 20 yeas, 2 nays, 2 absent. Item number 407-24, 21 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, 1 recusal. Item 408-24, 21 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, 1 recusal. Item number 414-24, 21 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, 1 recusal. Item 415-24, 21 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, 1 recusal. Item 329-24, 20 yeas, 2 nays, 2 absent, and item 455-24 with 21 yeas, 1 nay, 2 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we're going to go to second call, please. I'm going to recognize the Chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee to report out 391-24. I'm then going to recognize Councilor Block, who placed this on second call. But before I do, I want to just set some procedural context here, but I'll let the Chair go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to say that at the outset. My understanding, just so everyone is clear, this is an item that did not pass the committee. There was a motion to approve. It failed 4-4. So ultimately, if you think the candidate should not be approved, you would support the recommendation of the committee. If you think the candidate should be approved, you would vote against the recommendation of the committee. Everybody clear on that? It's a little backwards from what you think, but that's the way it's procedurally framed. But I'll go into the item. This is 391-24, the appointment of Deborah Crosley, an associate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, for a term of office to expire November 18th, 2025, a year from now. Just as I indicated, the committee motion to approve failed 4-4, and I'll get into what I think is the simplest way to deal with this is just to read the report, which is relatively brief because it was in the packet, but the public will not have easy access to it. Ms. Crosley has a background in environmental design and architecture, having run her own architecture business. This skill is not present on the ZBA currently, and no architect serves on the board. Ms. Crosley described using these skills to aid colleagues while serving as a city councilor on the Land Use and Zoning and Planning Committees. She affirmed her respect for the law, ordinances, and the limit of authority of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Regarding the chair's question on if she would be comfortable invoking safe harbor, Ms. Crosley stated that she would invoke safe harbor if eligible on most projects, with an exception being if a project were very minor. When the memo from the law department was published on this topic in February, she spoke with the Deputy City Solicitor, Jonah Temple, to ensure a full understanding of what it meant that the city had achieved the ability to invoke safe harbor. I'm just going to say parenthetically, safe harbor is a reference to the fact that under Chapter 40B, if a community reaches a threshold of 10% affordable housing, it authorizes the community to turn down or condition a project that would otherwise be able to proceed under the 40B process. Doesn't mean they have to, it just gives that authority. Multiple counselors, both on and off the committee, spoke highly of Ms. Crossley's qualifications and how she would be an asset to the Zoning Board of Appeals. A counselor especially noted the high quality of review that Ms. Crossley put into projects as a member of the Land Use Committee. Other counselors raised concerns that Ms. Crossley could not exercise balanced judgment on the Zoning Board of Appeals due to her pro-housing advocacy work and cited heated discussions during the development of the Village Center Overlay District, which was the part of the work we did to comply with the state mandate. One counselor noted that this appointment might be too soon due to her recent departure from the City Council and asked if she could review projects objectively. Ms. Crossley noted that to listen to all points of view and stated that every project needs to be evaluated on its merits, along with the input received from the public. Later in the discussion, she reaffirmed the importance of considering the context of the project to make sure it fits within the community context. At the conclusion of that discussion, there was a motion to approve. Councilors Oliver, Wright, Getz, and Kalis opposed, and the remainders of the committee supporting it. The motion therefore fails. So again, if you support what the committee recommended, you vote aye, which means that this is a non-approval. But if you disagree with the committee report, you vote no. Okay?
Thank you, Chair Baker. Very well stated. There's one other nuance here that it's not really a nuance, but people should be aware of. In order for this council to reject an appointee proffered by the mayor, we have to have a 2/3 vote of those present and voting who would vote against it. Since we are missing 2 people this evening, 2 colleagues this evening, that means in order to uphold the committee's recommendation of denial, there would need to be 15 affirmative yes or aye votes for denial. And again, unlike our usual order of business, as Councilor Baker explained, not once but twice, but I think is worth repeating, if you are going to vote yes on this item, you are voting to uphold the committee's recommendation and deny the appointment. If you vote no, you're voting against the committee's recommendation and in favor of the appointment. So with that, the only other thing I'm going to urge is there was an extensive discussion in the Zoning and Planning Committee on this subject. This is a former colleague of ours. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have vigorous and appropriate debate. We should, but I'm going to respectfully ask that people try not to repeat oneself, keep it relatively short, and then we can vote however in good conscience you feel you vote, which is how we do all our votes. So with that, Councilor Block, if you would explain why you put this on second call, you're then free to proffer your views and anyone else who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. My fellow city councilors, sorry, rearrange this. Is that better? The highly unusual tie vote in the Zoning and Planning Committee regarding Deborah Crossley's nomination to the ZBA tells us at least one thing. This is a controversial appointment. The mayor who chose to make this nomination knew full well that Deb Crossley would be a controversial appointment. Deb Crossley herself must have known that her nomination would provoke controversy. So why did the mayor make this nomination? And why did Deb Crossley agree to it? For those of you who support Deb Crossley because you admire her willingness to serve this city and because she has a set of skills that would benefit the ZBA, I ask that you consider the following. Does our current debate remind you of anything? To me, the debate in ZAP and the expressions of support and opposition that we've received from the public remind me of the rancor and divisiveness on display during the last city council. I thought that this city council had been doing a pretty good job avoiding an us against them mentality. It seemed to me we were working hard to find common ground of issues facing Newton rather than having one side bulldoze its way through the city council. Some of you may disagree with what I'm about to say, but I believe we are being manipulated. We are being manipulated into arguing with one another over an unnecessary dispute. Please step back for a moment and ask yourself, isn't there a better way of serving the ZBA than nominating a former city councilor who was defeated in the last election? Did the mayor ask any of us for names of architects who might serve on the ZBA? She did not ask me. Did she ask any of you? If so, I will ask the president if I can yield some of my time so you can tell us. My fellow councilors, I will not be manipulated. The simplest way to reject manipulation is to reject the nomination of Deb Crossley. That's how I will vote, and in my opinion, she should be rejected unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Block. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Councilors Albright and then Grossman and Lobovitz. Go ahead, please.
I think I'd like to try and summarize those of us who spoke, some of whom were on the committee and others who were not on, other councilors who were not on the committee, to try and summarize why we voted for Councilor Crossley, former Councilor Crossley. And I have a very different opinion from the ones referenced by Councilor Block just now. I don't feel manipulated. I feel like the mayor has sought out someone with expertise needed on the ZBA, and that's why she was nominated. So for several reasons, I think Councilor Lipoff mentioned Councilor Crossley's longstanding service to the city, including way back when the comprehensive plan was written, including part of the Citizens Energy Commission, including on the Building Standards Committee and serving on Green Newton. And she has received awards from several of these committees for her service. On the Land Use Committee, it was noted by several that her participation as an architect enhanced our ability to review land use projects. And she used her skills to make projects better. And while the committee doesn't often turn down a project, oftentimes when the things aren't going well, a project will ask to withdraw without prejudice. So I think that during the years she served on the Land Use Committee, she served us well to make sure that the projects were good for the city as a whole. As Councilor Baker mentioned during his report, she satisfied his question about whether she would invoke safe harbor or not, which was certainly a question that others had had. And finally, I want to just add that this is not about zoning. Yes, there was controversy about zoning, the zoning that was done to meet the MBTA Communities Act. But this is not a zoning project that she's being asked to do. She's being asked to do the same kind of work that's done on the Land Use Committee. And her skills are impeccable for that. And I just hope that we will vote to approve her nomination tonight.
So if you're going to vote to approve the nomination,
We'll
you're going to vote
no.
no, just as a
Yes.
reminder to everybody.
Thank you very much
I don't
for
want any confusion about how you're voting. Councilor Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think there is anything manipulative about nominating someone who served the city honorably, respectfully, responsibly, intelligently, and with an unbelievable work ethic for, if I have it right, more than 16 years. Someone correct me if, give or take, I don't know exactly, but when I became a city councilor, Deb Crossley was already well established as someone who was a thought leader, not only in land use and architecture related issues, but worked with Mayor Fuller when Mayor Fuller was an alderman, then city councilor, to develop and completely overhaul our underground water, sewer, and stormwater plan, which has had tremendous benefit for the city. Deb Crossley was way more of an asset to the city than just in talking about those issues. And I think that she demonstrated her intelligence and deep care and passion for the city in so many ways over the course of her time. So for the mayor to nominate someone who she worked with hand in hand in the mayor's 8 years as a counselor, and then so honorably in what's now nearly my 8 years as a counselor, to me demonstrates a track record and trust and faith in someone and seeing their skills and being grateful that that person is willing to continue on even after going through what was undoubtedly a really difficult personal experience in this last election. So I personally am grateful that Deb Crossley wants to serve. I'm perfectly capable of making my own determinations and saying yes or no to a mayoral appointee. There's nothing in my mind. I don't believe that is manipulation. I don't think the mayor putting forward someone she believes is manipulation. And quite frankly, I find it a somewhat insulting suggestion to be told that I'm being manipulated over such an appointment. So I'm sure I've made myself perfectly clear at this point, but I will be voting no on the committee's recommendation. And if Deb Crossley is listening, I want to say thank you for everything that you taught me over the years. We didn't agree on everything. I didn't always see things the same way she did. She was passionate on certain issues, and she bravely put that out there. And I admire and respect it, even where at times I did not share it. So that's all I have to say. I will be voting no.
Thank you, Councilor Grossman. Councilor Lovovich, please.
I don't have any doubt about Deborah Crossley's qualifications. I don't also feel manipulated by this, but I take a different tack or think about it in a different way from the way people have been talking about this nomination. And I just wanted to explain that. I'm referring to the memo that Jonah Temple wrote about the ZBA to clarify the different rules under which the ZBA operates depending on the situation in relationship to Safe Harbor. So there are really three phases or three scenarios, if you will. There's one under which Safe Harbor doesn't apply. He gave the examples of Craft Street, and there was one other recently, Boylston, I think it was. That's a situation in which there's a decision to make whether to approve the project as a comprehensive permit, which gives the ZBA much less latitude, I would say, in terms of ways in which they could reject a project. This is how I understand it. A limited number of reasons to reject it. However, from experience and my observation of the ZBA, it still seems to me that through the process of the public hearing, even under a comprehensive permit provision, the decision, there's a lot of back and forth with interested parties, particularly people in the neighborhoods, in the ward that's affected. And there's an honest attempt to respond to those concerns. So that's one thing, even though they have the power to reject a lot of those issues or concerns, whether it's traffic or parking or other things. The second phase is when the safe harbor is determined to apply to an application. In that situation, as we were just talking about, the ZBA could say they are not invoking safe harbor, even though they could. And that's when that was a question that Councilor Baker asked.
Councilor Lobovitz, you're over your allotted time. How much more do you need?
Can I continue? Can I get permission?
2 more, a minute?
Okay.
All right, all in favor of granting Councilor Lobovitz another minute, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Go ahead, please.
Okay, and the last one is where safe harbor is invoked, but the ZBA can still operate under the presumption of a comprehensive permit. So those are the three situations. In each case, there is latitude, some more than others, to take into consideration the concerns of the neighborhood and residents. The reason that I'm voting in favor is because I observed through the campaign and listening to hearings that she does not take into consideration, as much as I would have liked, the concerns of the residents. And since that issue is present in every situation that I just described, the three situations, I think it's very important that somebody on the ZBA is a listener, an understanding, and has a sympathetic ear to the concerns of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lobovitz. Councilor Danberg, then Farrell, then Lucas, then Leary, then Wright. Go ahead, please.
I'm up there, Mr. President.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Councilor Gentile. I'll put you on too.
Thanks.
Go ahead, please, Councilor Danberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Neither do I feel manipulated in any way by Deb Crossley's appointment at all. And I will be wholeheartedly supporting Deb for appointment as an alternative member of the ZBA. She is very qualified for appointment and will not only provide the technical skills as a longtime practicing architect, she brings decades of experience in plan reading needed on the ZBA. There is not an architect currently on ZBA, and a complete and thorough understanding of Newton building requirements and Newton process, which she has honed over many, many years, decades of experience. The law also clearly states that this appointed position is based on the professional qualifications of the appointee. Deb is an outstanding candidate in filling all of the requirements of the ZBA, of a ZBA member. And as such, I consider her a terrific choice as an appointee to the ZBA. I have known Deb and sat on committees with her since her arrival on the council, and I know her to be an open-minded and careful listener. She has worked hard from day one to do what is best for the city and for all of its residents. Her vision for the development of the city has been to work to include all income levels and all abilities, to encourage energy efficiency on all buildings, responsible fitting development, low carbon emissions, buildings, again, that are accessible to all, and adhering to the highest standards of building practice. Her first act as a councilor was to educate council members to be the first community in Massachusetts to adopt the stretch code. So I hope you will join me in affirming Deb in her appointment on the ZBA and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Danberg. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise cautiously on this occasion. I ran for election to the Newton City Council in 2023 to significant degree because, like too many residents, I was dismayed by the nearly constant antagonistic tone and rancor on display in this body at that time. Ms. Crossley, rightly or wrongly, is still perceived by many residents as one of the leading forces of that rancor. Despite what I understand from her supporters as her prodigious technical skills and length of service, all positions on our many agencies, boards, and indeed city departments require the equally critical skill of being able to listen genuinely to the people we serve. There is no decision made by any city agency, board, or department that is based solely on the technical merits. We must always demonstrate that we not only have listened, but that we also have heard. The very fact that we are again facing such strong discord on this particular nomination demonstrates that we have not yet sufficiently healed from that very recent difficult period, and we must heal. I am disappointed that the mayor did not present us an equally capable nominee from our 6,000 plus adults, someone who has demonstrated not only appropriate technical skills and experience, but also the equally critical skill of being able to hear. Unfortunately, it is my experience. Too recently in our history, Ms. Crossley has demonstrated the former technical support, but not the latter. Therefore, I oppose Ms. Crossley's nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. And then we're going to turn to Councilors Leary, Wright, and Gentile. And I think that'll cover everyone who wants to speak. Go ahead, please, Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, President Laredo. Yes, I think it's safe to say that this is a controversial appointment. I did watch the Zoning and Planning Committee meeting, a recording of it, the other day, and I just wanted to listen the arguments pro and con for Ms. Crossley. I think both sides, yes or no, for her appointment have valid points. They made good points. You know, I've heard, even with the emails that we've received and the folks who have spoken here tonight, she has all the qualifications. But at the same time, it is controversial, and I do understand when people say that she is not a good listener to residents, especially those most affected by development and zoning changes. And I just want to go back to one of the reasons why this is so controversial. It was a committee meeting last year, and I have the text from the meeting, and she said, and I quote, "If people don't like what we do, they can vote us out at the next election." I think it's those comments which I think have bothered a lot of people. So I did something today which many people probably did not expect me to do. I called Deb. And we spoke on the phone. We had a fine conversation. We were getting caught up, and we were talking about her appointment and the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I just want to briefly pivot to the Zoning Board of Appeals associate members, just to make sure what everyone knows what she is applying for. An associate member. The chairperson shall designate an associate member to serve in the place of a regular member in the case of a temporarily unfilled vacancy, inability to act, absence, or conflict of interest on the part of the regular member. Such designation of associate members should be on a rotating basis. So if confirmed, Ms. Crossley would sit as an associate member, and there's no guarantee she would even vote on an item, and if she does, it would only be on a rotating basis, and I believe this appointment is only for 1 year. So getting back to Deb Crossley, I did tell her that I would support her nomination to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I think she has all the qualifications, and serving as an associate member, in my opinion, I think will be fine. I do understand where I think Councilor Farrell was getting at when he said of the 60,000 registered voters or adults in this city, that none of them got the call to serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I did have an email exchange with the mayor's office today, and there is still one more vacancy on the Board of Appeals, Zoning Board of Appeals, for an associate member. I would hope, if the mayor intends to fill this vacancy, that we do see some diverse viewpoints of the membership. Particularly, I would love to see if there was a member or someone affiliated with either Right Size Newton or Save Our Villages. Let's hear that voice on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Let's hear that voice on the Planning and Development Board. Let's hear that voice on the Newton Historical Commission, because those voices are absent. So I will support Ms. Crossley's nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. I have Councilors Leary, Wright, and Gentile, and I think that covers it. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very
Councilor
much, Mr. President. I did speak on Ms. Crossley's appointment during the zoning and planning meeting, and I'm very appreciative of the comments of my colleagues, including Councilor Lucas, Albright, Grossman, and Danberg. I am actually voting my values, my conscience, and my commitment to getting great quality citizens volunteering for really important jobs like the ZBA. We often don't have enough qualified candidates, so I'm very grateful for anyone that stands up to serve. But I'm particularly enthusiastic about Ms. Crossley's candidacy, simply because she has been such an effective voice. She is an architect. We don't have one on the ZBA. Effective, yes. Sometimes effective people also can rub people the wrong way. That can happen. Passionate, certainly. And I've been grateful for her strong voice on many issues, and Councilor Grossman just mentioned a few of them. Forthright, yes. I think she will be an excellent candidate on the ZBA, which is not unlike the Land Use Committee, where she was so effective, and many of my colleagues have said so. So I don't want to conflate the politics of the City Council, particularly the ZAP committee, the Zoning and Planning Committee, during a very difficult time when we were discussing zoning reform, which is always going to be a difficult, lengthy, and somewhat divisive conversation. It's sort of the nature of that. It doesn't have to be that way. I do believe she's thoughtful. I do believe she listens. Sometimes people feel she doesn't because then she doesn't necessarily agree with you. And like other people who've spoke, I don't always agree with my colleagues either. I think I haven't agreed with every single one of you at one point or another, and that includes Councilor Crossley. And I think that's an important thing. I think we need that kind of diversity, that kind of discussion that we're having tonight. But I would urge my colleagues to support her candidacy and vote no on the recommendation of the ZBA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. I have Councilor Wright, then Councilor Gentile, and then we're going to vote this.
Thank you. I feel the mayor is adding people to the ZBA for the 40Bs coming down the road with people who may not evoke safe harbor. In my opinion, evoking safe harbor will give us much better projects. Working with Ms. Crossley for 4 years on ZAP, I've seen firsthand that she's not open to differences of opinions. She pushes her own agenda. At public meetings, residents have repeatedly told me they felt they were treated with arrogance and disrespected. The residents of Newton did not support her for City Council and voted her out. I will not support Deb Crossley for the ZBA and will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Gentile, you have the last word, and then we're going to vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly don't feel manipulated. I would not have used that word. But this is not the most comfortable position that I have been in on the council, that's for sure. And the reason for that is over 36 years, I have had many, many former colleagues come back before the council, nominated for different boards and commissions in the city. And some of them I would consider friends and I saw that I got along with, agreed with quite a bit. Some of them were acquaintances. We might have been, 50-50. And then some of the folks that came back were people that I rarely agreed with. But I still, because I still voted for every single one of them. I've never voted against a former colleague. I don't think I've ever voted against an appointment in 36 years. And that's a lot of appointments. However, I'm not supporting this appointment tonight, which is what makes me uncomfortable, though I'm comfortable in my reasons for it. Nobody questions, including me, whether my former colleague has the intelligence to serve in this position or whether or not she has the passion. I mean, that's undeniable. And she certainly has the qualifications. But for me, it's pretty simple. Having observed the ZBA over many years and having gone in there and testified on many different petitions. And when I think of the larger petitions, the one up in Ward 8 that people just spent so much time on, and Craft Street, those are petitions that are really, really emotional and mean a lot to our constituents. And I think that you need to, when you walk into that room, whether you're, quote, a developer or whether you're one of the residents, you should feel that the people sitting in front of you that are going to vote on this are as neutral on the item as can possibly be. And in this case, whether we like it or not, when you spend 16 years on a council, you develop a record. And Deb's record.
Councilor Gentile, you need another minute or two. How much would you like?
2 at the most.
All right. All in favor of granting Councilor Gentile an additional 2 minutes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Go ahead, Councilor Gentile.
So in this case, Deb has, and I call it Deb because, we've had, many social nights together after meetings and stuff. And I like Deb as the individual. Our politics just differ. And I think if you look at the record and you're honest about it, it's clear that she has been a counselor who has supported, development, in my opinion, overdevelopment. And if I was walking in on an item in front of that was in my neighborhood, I wouldn't feel very comfortable that I had a fair shot at getting her vote for me and my neighbors versus the developer that was on the other side. So that's why I am, taking the unusual step of not voting, for this appointment. And that's the bottom line. You need to be Solomon. You need to be seen as neutral. And that, to me, I don't see how, based on the record, that my former colleague will be seen that way. There are many, many, many positions and ways that former Alderman Crossley could provide a very helpful role. There's just no doubt about it. This is probably the only one that I think is not a good position for her.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Seeing no other comments, I'm going to ask that we call the roll. Let me just remind you once again, a yes vote is to affirm the denial. A no vote is to reject the denial and essentially approve. And in order to uphold the rejection, we need 15 yes votes. Everybody got it? Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Albright.
No.
Counselor Baker.
No.
Counselor Bixby.
No.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
No.
Counselor Downs.
No.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
No.
Counselor Grossman.
No.
Counselor Humphrey.
No.
Counselor Kalis. Counselor Kelly.
No.
Counselor Krinsman.
No.
Counselor Leary.
No.
Counselor Lipoff.
No.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Yes.
Counselor Lucas.
Nope.
Counselor Maliki.
Yes.
Counselor Mickley. Counselor Oliver.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
President Laredo.
Yes.
Motion fails.
All
10,
right.
10 yeas, 13 nays. Hold on. It's 23. Yes, sorry. 2 absent.
All right, so we move on to the,
It's 9 yeas, 10 nays, 2 absent. Wait, yes.
no, 9, 10, and 2 is
9, 13, and 2.
9, 13, and 2, okay?
Yes.
So 9 yeas, 13 nays, 2 absent. The item fails, and therefore the appointment is approved. Everybody clear on that? Okay. Last item of the night is one more item. It is from the Finance Committee. Councilor Gentile, you placed this on second call, but I'm going to ask Vice Chair Maliki to present the item briefly, and then I'll recognize Councilor Gentile.
Programs and services too, I think.
Oh, forgive me, you're 100% right. So before you step up, Vice Chair Maliki, I'm going to ask Chair Krinsman to do that. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I'm not mistaken here, it's item 409-24. On November 6th, the Programs and Services Committee took this up. This was the authorization to appropriate $2 million to the NPS Educational Stabilization Fund. We did have a discussion with Superintendent Nolan. Chair of the school committee, Bresky, was present as well, asked a few questions. The intention of this, if my understanding was correct, was to extend the life of the education fund that we all approved, the education stabilization fund that we all approved just a few months ago. So the vote in committee was unanimous, yes.
Thank you, Chair Krinsman. Vice Chair Maliki, please, for Finance.
All right, so the Finance Committee discussed this on November 13. I guess I don't have any information to add about the purpose of it. We voted 5-0-1 with Councilor Gentile abstaining to approve the item. And
Okay, Councilor Gentile, you placed this item on second call. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just quickly summarize the points that I made in committee. And also, let me say at the outset that I have no illusions of convincing anyone to vote against money for the school department. But I do think that it's important, since I'm voting against the item, that I at least explain my reasons. So last year, when we took the unprecedented step of setting up a stabilization fund for the Newton Public Schools, it's actually something that I had mentioned on several different occasions, much prior to the actual establishment of the fund. I believed in it. I thought that it was a way to help resolve the teacher strike, and we had the money to do it, which was the most important thing. So I was 100% in favor of it, and still am. However, I don't remember any discussions about less than a year of us adding additional money to the fund. If you remember, it was approximately $22 million that we set aside to put into a savings account to support our schools. That's what Newton is all about. And it's a blessing that we had the money. But again, I did not expect to be asked to take another $2 million and put it in the fund to try and help in some out years, you know, the 5th or 6th year, I'm not sure which one it is. Personally, I think that there are other uses for that money that we could be using it for right now. I don't have to, you know, give you a list. You all know the, you know, the many to-dos that you get asked about all the time. The other point is, there were conversations led by the, or at least initiated by the school administration that talked about the need to get over the hump these first couple of years, you know, because of certain expenses that they have, until the administration is in position to make some savings that they feel could be made within the system. But it takes time to go through the system, understand it, and then to make those recommendations. That made sense to me. I haven't heard much discussion about that since those talks and those suggestions were made, you know, a year or so ago. And I was of the belief that we were going to be seeing some savings that could be made, along with the fact that I believe we continue to drop in enrollment. We've certainly dropped in enrollment.
Counselor Gentile, you're hitting your 3-minute mark. You need more time?
1 minute.
1 minute, please. All in favor of suspending the rules to allow an additional minute, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Go ahead, please.
So, you know, I was expecting that we would get some recommendations before we were asked to again put more money into this fund. There are a lot of needs out there. Once again, I'm going to make a plug. There's a project that was moving along in the process that would have developed 8 units of family affordable housing at the site of the former Parks and Recreation Department. Okay, along with an outstanding pocket park in a neighborhood that did not have one. And that was shot down by this city council several years ago, and which I think was a great loss. But it still sits there. The land still sits there. Maybe it needed to be larger. Maybe we should be talking about 12 units. $2 million would be a great start to trying to help to get that project off the ground. We talk about affordable units. There was an article in the Globe the other day about how city and state-owned properties are a way to create affordable units. So as one concrete idea, why don't we try and take some of our free cash money and put it towards this project? Because
Councilor Gentile, you're out of time again. Would you like another minute to finish up?
No, I'll finish up by saying, what greater need is there than affordable family housing in this city?
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll. This is like any other typical item. Voting aye or yes means you approve the funding, meaning no, you're voting against it. Go ahead, please, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
No.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs. Aye. Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
No.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalisz. Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lovovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley. Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 20 yeas, 2 nays, 2 absent.
All right, Councilor Downs, do you have a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned at 8:41 p.m. Thank you all very much. For those who I do not see at land use or public facilities, have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, everyone, and we'll be back in full council in December. Thank you. Pardon? Oh, I won't forget that. But not one of my committees, Councilor Baker.
It's Birdo night at the Pops.